Sure. Since this is a new committee, we have in addition to this committee, we have a public committee, which is called our Plan Monitoring Advisory Committee. That's made up of industry representatives as well as members of the public. And this is a requirement of the province as part of our approved solid waste management plan. So the way that committee operates is they are able to make recommendations up to this committee, and we will share the minutes of that meeting with this committee every time we have that meeting. They meet about twice a year or more if needed. And the chair of this committee, so Director Stamer, is by default appointed to that committee. So there's a bit of crossover between this committee and the public committee.
And please guests before our presentation.
And I'm on. Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Rose, and I'll be presenting today on the Tamil Good Earth Recycling Waste Facility and my colleagues over here. So our purpose today is to introduce the Tamil team, present our proposed facility, and request an amendment to the TNRD's solid waste management plan to incorporate the proposed TMIC facility. On the agenda, we'll do introductions, speak briefly about the Bonaparte First Nation traditional territory and their economic development activities that are going on right now. We'll give everyone an overview of the facility, what we've been doing with the ministry for over a year, and the TNRD. So our team, which most are sitting over here to my right. First, we have the Bonaparte First Nation Chief Frank, CEO Sean Bennett, their business partner Ian, and on the line we have Deacon Liddy. He and I work together at GHD, and we're their solid waste consultants. Now Chief Frank is going to come up and present the next couple slides.
Wag up pressure quest. Like before I can start, like I said, I like to thank the council to Sawako for allowing us to be here today on their traditional lands. And today I get to share a little bit about who we are in our traditional lands. As you know, we're located near Cache Creek, 5 minutes above Cache Creek. When I was sat there, and I don't know if some of you have met already when you guys had your TNRD, I think what was that? The depot about a couple months ago, right? And I guess you heard my speech then. The land that you're on is our traditional land, and we always want to share. There's a word in our language. There's actually two words in our language called when you look at this world, when you look at what we're dealing up there, I look at it as helping one another. In order to help one another, you got to help yourself. And that's exactly where our community is now. We're starting to help ourselves to be independent, self-sufficient, be a part of society. And it's something that we've always been striving for and we've been struggling with. And now we get an opportunity to grow something for our community, but also the surrounding communities. And it's important that we share that land together now and the opportunities that we grow with. There's the cultural values definitely that we have there, but it's our economic opportunities that we really strive to move forward with. And we've done that in the last couple of years on this last term with our council. Very proud to be with them. And when I see this type of opportunity, it creates the one difference that I really love about this is that it has that recyclable piece to it. Because that's what we do with our cultures. We make sure that we take care of Mother Earth. And this is something that we can do together. And it's an opportunity for us to move forward together. And I'm always looking for those great opportunities. And, that's the relationship that we have to have. And I do believe we have a great relationship with our local communities. But now we have to do it, at the other level. This is the level I'd love to see us moving together. And it does take time. And I hope that the process that you're looking for and the things that you want from us, that we can provide, but also is something that we're looking for from you, is to build that relationship with us. And we have that opportunity today, and why we're standing up here to make sure that we've come together. And it's important that we move forward, and this is one of the things that it's going to be a big opportunity for us. Just gotta hit this button, right? So again, to milk in our language means the land, and to see this view behind you, that's exactly what we're doing. And to take care of the land, we get an opportunity to grow around it. So again, we have these different things that we're doing. The water treatment plant is something we've done now. And we've been fighting that for quite a few decades. Now we have RR1, which is up near Hack Creek. RR number 2 is in between, just above Hack Creek Ranch, and RR number 3. We're finally getting potable water in our community. And I thank the government for helping us get that, because that's something now in the last 30 years that we now have people moving home, because now we can build that infrastructure for them to have that opportunity to come home, because now we're creating a lot of jobs in our community. We went from about 20 staff to about 80 staff this last 2 years. The amount of work that we're doing, contract work around there, is amazing. You look up there at the Welcome Center for the Maccabee Fossil Site, it's going to be a cultural center. And that cultural center is not just about our culture, but it's around the surrounding history that comes with that. I was born and raised there, and I have a lot of great relationships still that come from there, childhood friendships. And then you look at the tourism at Hack Creek Ranch. That's a combination of the two, and it's really important to us that we tell that story. Oh, drop the phone. I thought you guys thought I dropped the mic or something. But it's something that I really am very proud of. It's something I've been passionate about, and I've taken up tourism now. And that's, if you know who I am with my background, tourism is something I really fell in love with, and I've traveled the world doing and telling and keynote speaking on that. And it's when you can actually go home and talk about your own community rather than a job, that gives you a lot of pride, and it does give me that. So, you know, as we move forward, I'll pass on to the next speakers. But Tamil Good Land Recycling Water Waste Facility is going to be a great opportunity, because now we can return something back from the earth of what we put out there. Now we have something we can actually put back. So I really thank you for allowing me to speak in front of you today. So Kukshjem. Okay.
Thanks, Frank, for doing that.
So, been a partner with Bonaparte for a number of years. I believe in recycling. I believe in Bonaparte. And I used to live in Kamloops myself. I used to run junior achievement here way back when. I think we had 14 classes going on in the area. And I used to be in the Chamber of Commerce. And I'll apologize, I used to be a banker. So in terms of economic development and social economic development for Bonaparte, and also for the TNRD, oh yes, you also used to be on the TNRD board for manufacturing as well. So I love your boards, and I'm looking forward to working with you people as we move this project forward. This is a recycling project, and we all want to get to zero waste. But as part of recycling and bringing in MSW, we do need a landfill component to it. And that's what we're asking of you today. As Rose mentioned earlier, our ask is simply add us to the list of sites that you have. And we're here to partner with you in terms of organics. If you have organics that need to be helped with, we want to make a potting soil facility. It's a huge job creation. There's marketing, there's accounting, there's the actual potting facility itself. And if we bring in waste from elsewhere, we're happy to pay the levy that you've charged others to help in using that money to further develop your situation here. But then we have a backhaul, and that backhaul for us is not an empty truck, which is going to be Bonaparte people driving those trucks as owner operators. It's going to be a backhaul of potting soil that we're going to take down to the lower mainland and sell down there. There's a huge market for it. We will wish that there wasn't recyclables in MSW, but there still is. And we want to pull those out, be it metal, be it plastic, be it glass, and recycle those. In terms of the compost facility itself, we're already within about a year down the road with the Ministry of Environment in terms of getting this. They see no issues with us technically. But they've suggested ourselves that we don't do the organic permitting at this point. We just get the landfill permitted first as an operating certificate. And then we would potentially rack it up. But 20,000 tons annually of organics is a lot of potting soil, a lot of potting soil. So we'd be under that number for sure. We think there's about 50 jobs to be created in the Cache Creek area with this facility. The landfill itself is not a huge employer. I think we all know that, but the recycling component is. Our business plan is the recycling component is on a break-even basis and maybe even subsidized by the tipping fees from the landfill. Again, another reason we're asking you to add us to the list that you have of existing landfills. We think the opportunity is great for Bonaparte. We think it's great for the regional district. We think there's huge partnerships with the organics in the regional district. And it's a simple ask. We're asking to be permitted beside an existing landfill. And as far as recycling goes, you yourself use that area for recycling. We just want to make it a bigger operation. That's the piece of land we're talking about where you had your recycling facility on a temporary basis. So it's an area that's already used for landfills, and it's an area that was already used for recycling. And technically it's very sound. And we're just looking for your support in adding us to your amendment on your plan so that we can have this landfill as part of the regional district. I'll now turn it over to our next speaker.
So this is a flyover of the facility concept. So we're approaching the site. You can see the old TNRD recycling depot there in red. The Campbell Hill landfill. It's just here, I guess at the bottom of the screen now. So at the entrance of the facility is where the recycling depot, the material recovery area, and the composting area will be as well. Obviously behind it is the landfill. The piece that's colored is phase 1. So those are 3 cells. The 2 ponds to the left, one is a leachate treatment pond and the other is a stormwater pond, and we'll get into the details in a little bit. Okay, so the facility, as Ian and I already mentioned, it's next to the Campbell Hill landfill and it's on the same site as the former TNRD recycling depot. It will have a facility material recovery area for recycling organics, and it will be designed in accordance with OMR, it's the organics recycling regulation. The landfill itself, it'll only accept municipal solid waste for commercial customers. There won't be any hazardous medical or liquid waste accepted. And the landfill cells will be double lined and have a leak detection system. So that's above and beyond the ministry design requirements. Right now, it's only required to have a single liner. So this facility will have 2 liners and a leak detection system. The leachate portion of the facility, so capturing that leachate that's generated in each cell and bringing it over to the leachate pond for treatment. Those leachate ponds will also be double lined and have a leak detection system. Stormwater, so stormwater will be managed on site. We'll, do our best to separate stormwater from leachate. So trying to reduce that leachate generation as much as possible. Stormwater, which is clean, will be conveyed to the stormwater pond and infiltrated so it can return back to the natural environment. So this is a figure of that concept, same figure that you saw for the flyover. So the red outline is the landfill footprint at completion. So that's, many years away. Phase 1 would just be the cell 1, 2, and 3, and the leachate ponds there at the bottom right, and the stormwater ponds. And at the front of the landfill there will be the entrance with the waste recovery area, the composting, and the scale house. So our team has been working with the ministry for a year now. The site was selected in 2021. And the next piece after that site selection is to do a technical desktop study to make sure that that site is in fact suitable for a landfill. That information goes into what's called a preliminary site feasibility study, and it is submitted to the ministry. And our results that we determined through that desktop study, did say that it was a suitable site, and that's to be expected considering the Campbell Hill landfill is right next door. We also submitted the waste authorization intake application to the ministry at the same time. So that's our formal request to the ministry for an operational certificate for the landfill. At the beginning of this year, we submitted our consultation plan and also the application plan. And we have been working with the ministry over this last quarter, and they've confirmed that the requirements in our documents submitted to date have been met. In addition to the documents, the technical documents that we submitted to the ministry, we've also completed some field activities. So we've gone to our site and completed some drilling. That's us on the bottom left. We've drilled 6 boreholes ranging from 6 to 24 meters below ground surface. In those boreholes are 2 groundwater monitoring wells in the shallow, so in the soil overburden, 3 in the bedrock, which is quite shallow in this area. And we've also collected some groundwater samples. And the purpose of collecting those groundwater samples is to characterize our baseline water quality. So what does the water quality look like before the land is developed, which is important because we'll be using that data if the proposed landfill goes in place. We'll be comparing, groundwater every year to those baseline concentrations. So today the water quality is hard to very hard, so lots of calcium, moderate to high metal contents, which is to be expected because of the geology. So like I said, the geology is quite close to surface and it's highly weathered. So if you can imagine when groundwater is flowing through it, it's going to pick up a lot of minerals. The groundwater also doesn't have a lot of nutrients and there's no anthropogenic contamination.
Excuse me, what's apathetic or whatever? What is
No, like human-made contamination. The groundwater is clean. Yeah. So the geology, lots of glacial tills and fluvial deposits, so sand and gravels and some silts. As I mentioned, the bedrock is close to surface and it's highly weathered, and below it is competent bedrock of limestones, chert, basalt, and agrolite. The bottom part First Nations did complete a field archaeological assessment. So they walked the site to determine if there are any sites of interest. They didn't discover any, and no further archaeological studies were recommended. Over the last 6 months, we have been working with the TNRD, so Jamie and Adriana to my left. We introduced our project to the TNRD back in October 2022. At the end of the year, we had an alignment meeting with GHD, the TNRD, and the ministry just to determine how we're going to move forward. Because with the landfill, you have 2 regulatory framework options. You can request a permit from the ministry to operate your landfill, or you can amend a solid waste management plan to include the new landfill. So the 3 of us together decided that the best path forward would be to request a solid waste management plan amendment, which is why we're here today. And since then, we've just been checking in, and we'll probably continue to do that throughout the year. Our next steps after today is to implement our consultation plan. So in developing that consultation plan, we identified 7 government agencies, of course, including the TNRD and the Village of Cache Creek, 15 First Nations and First Nation representatives, including Ashcroft, Oregon Jack Creek, and of course, Bonaparte. There are 6 adjacent property owners and 1 special interest group. Special interest group being the South Caribou Sportsman Club up there on the hill. So how are we going to implement that consultation plan? Well, it'll be a flexible process that can be adapted as we engage. At first, it will begin with local newspaper ads describing the project, and of course in the Ministry Gazette and some letters. We'll have an open house at the Bonaparte First Nation Band Hall. And we'll present the facility there and have a question and answers part of the open house. And for anyone who can't make the open house or they want a little bit more information, they can always go to the TMIC facility website and, you know, see what we're all about there. After the consultation period is over, we'll summarize the results and put them in a report and submit it to the ministry and the TNRD. That's the end of our presentation. That's our facility concept overview. So we'd like to say thank you. Or Ian, did you want to come up and do this last slide? Oh, Sean's going to. Okay, Sean's going to come up. Thanks, everyone.
And good morning. My name is Sean Bennett. I'm the CEO for Bonaparte First Nation. I just like to thank all you folks for your time today. It's great to hear the land acknowledgement, and just wanted to expand on maybe one of the reasons why that's so critical for Bonaparte and other First Nations in the area. And some of you might be familiar with the Douglas claims or the term specific claims, but Bonaparte in particular is a nation that experienced quite a considerable amount of land loss due to kind of reserve clawbacks. So just to give you an example, the original allocated signed off reserve boundaries for Bonaparte were from the Loon Lake turnoff to 8 miles below the town of Ashcroft. And what they ended up with after smallpox, excuse me, the population was so reduced, and people, you know, settlers were coming in and trying to settle the area and whatnot. And the provincial surveyors were writing to the federal government saying, you know, there's nobody here. So let's reduce this land size because you've given these people way too much land. So that started to happen. And eventually the reserve boundary at Bonaparte was clawed back to a very, very small spot, about 500 acres, where it currently is just above Cache Creek on essentially like a kind of a rocky outcropping. So as soon as the valley widens in any direction, northeast, west, or south, that land was kind of taken away and settled. So we just finalized 2 what they're called specific claims with the federal government, where the government of Canada is saying, yeah, you know, we made a mistake. Those lands were supposed to be yours. And those are it's called specific claim 33 and 34 that go from Loon Lake to below, still figuring out the very bottom boundary, but somewhere down around Ashcroft. So the land in question, like when First Nations people say, yeah, that's our land, you know, even before I kind of worked there and kind of really understood this equation, I would say, well, it's Crown land. Like, how does that work? It actually was Bonaparte's land that we're talking about. They had it in a contract that was reneged on by the federal government of Canada. So it's a very interesting topic when we come and talk to different various governments about economic development or different processes, and this land question is always kind of there. And you know, some people understand that, some don't, but I just wanted to highlight that a little bit for everybody. And I just say thanks for your time and considering our proposal. As you all know, I live in the Pritchard area, so in one of the regional districts, but Cache Creek is an economically depressed area. We're trying to promote business opportunities for Bonaparte in the local area. As the chief mentioned, we went from 20 employees to about 81 in the last couple of years, and significantly increased our what we call own source revenue, like outside government revenue. And we're trying to provide stimulus and good jobs for not only the band members, but people in the surrounding area. So this project is just another example of one of the initiatives that we're trying to push forward, and we're excited about it. And thank you for considering it. Is there any questions from anybody?
Yeah, thanks very much, Sean. Appreciate the presentation and the thorough information that everyone has provided, including Rosemary's. I had a couple of quick questions, and I have Director Houghton. Anybody else want to on the top, Dr. Sarai. Couple of questions. Will there be any methane recovery in your landfill? And the second question I had was, you did an excellent job of showing us your timelines. Could you tell us what your consulting timeline would be between the consulting and then the consultation report? Can you give us an idea of how long that process will take?
Deacon, do you want to answer the methane capture question?
I can, yeah. Sorry, I couldn't be there in person. But my name's Deacon Liddy. I'm an engineer on the project. And the landfill gas collection system will depend on the waste that is accepted. Right now it's MSW waste. And so when it would hit the triggers to install a system under the ministry requirements, then one would be installed. Based on the tonnage projected and others, that would probably mean that in the first 5 years, probably the 5 or 6 year mark, a gas collection system would need to be installed.
Thanks very much.
Welcome.
And the second, on the consultation timeline and the consultation report? Any idea how long that will take?
The consultation there'll be phases of consultation. This initial phase will happen in the next 6 months to a year. And there'll be a draft consultation report after that that goes into the ministry and TNRD as part of the process. There'll also be another consultation that is driven a bit by the ministry process if a draft OC comes out, and there'll be comment periods on that. And typically, if there's a draft operational certificate from the ministry, then people will ask the ministry questions on that. Ministry will send a lot of those questions to the proponent. They will provide answers, and the consultation report would be updated. Then that is probably a 2024 process. So initial process this year, more kind of back and forth process, and the consultation plan gets updated as it goes. Does that help answer?
Yes, thank you very much.
All right.
Director Houghton?
Thanks, Chair. Sean, you said in your report or part of the report that you've done consultation with the surrounding neighbors, landowners, neighbors, communities, all feedback on a positive nature.
I mean, that process is just kind of getting going. We're meeting with the district of Cass Creek in the near future, and I think as that process develops, there's going to be support for the project locally. I think in terms of economic development, there's going to be people who are against facilities such as this, and we'll deal with those issues as they come up.
Okay, thank you.
Director Sarai?
Thank you, Chair Steamer. Just a question. It was mentioned the organic waste was not on the table right now. The ministry advised you to go for the landfill permit first. Organic waste timeline wise, is it on your schedule to apply for that in the future? And what is the priority there?
I can answer that. Right now, we're allowed.
Right now, our plan is to start with the pilot on organic waste, and we're allowed to up to 20,000 tons a year to do that without having it permitted. And we want to start small. If the demand for a site to put organic waste existed for the regional district, for example, then we would go look at permitting it then to increase that intake. But at the present time, from the potting soil perspective, 20,000 tons a year is a lot of potting soil. And so we want to start small, grow the business, get the potting soil selling. But definitely, yes, we could permit that later down the road if the demand was there. Does that answer your question, Ken?
It doesn't. And the second question is capacity. What is the capacity if the demand grows? What is the capacity? Will you be if municipalities or other districts reach out to you? What is the capacity you can limit it to?
Well, initially, we would be limited to the 20,000 tons without the permit. But if the capacity was going to be there, then we would go apply for that permit and go get it to meet the capacity that required to service everybody. In terms of the site itself, it's large enough that all this could be happening quite easily. It's going to be about 39 hectares in total with the recycling facility and the landfill itself.
And
Thank
the
you.
timelines are a bit different as well. To permit a landfill takes 3 to 4 years. To permit a compost facility or an increase in compost capacity can be closer to a year or two. So easier to get more permitting capacity and than it is for a compost facility than it is for a landfill. So we're starting with the one that takes the longest.
Any other good questions? They've all been great questions, by the way. We thank you for your true interest in this.
Is there any other directors that have a question? Director Roden.
Thank you, Chair Stamer. Just a statement and a question, a statement. I would hope that the village of Ashcroft will be one of the local governments that you will be consulting, discussing with. And the other, you did mention the South Caribou Sportsmen Association, who of course do have their clubhouse and facilities. Looks like on the footprint of where this is planned for. What stage of discussion are you at with the Sportsmen's Association?
Well, the first people we came to consult with is you. We thought it was most appropriate to come to the TNRD first. So this is the beginning of the public process. So you're the only people that are aware of this outside of the Ministry of Environment, who we've be talking to, obviously. And of course, we've been working with your great staff here for the last 6 months as well on this project. Everybody you mentioned to is definitely going to be consulted with, without a doubt. We want to talk to everybody, and we'll do the process as long as it takes to make everybody happy. And we want to work with everybody. But as far as, does anybody else know about this? You're the first, because you're the regional district. We need the amendment to the plan. So we came to you first, which hopefully you appreciate that. The next people we're going to be talking to is the village of Cache Creek.
Well, thanks very much for that, Ian, and for the entire presentation. On behalf of the entire solid waste management. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for your time, right?
Yeah.
Kanukan Twat to Kanukan you, helping one another. That's in our language, and that means in different levels. Helping us individually, helping yourself, but that's what we do. And we're getting that opportunity now in our life in this lifetime, at this time of our lives, that we're doing that. And Kanukan you means helping yourself. And that's why you're here today, because you want to help and serve what you're doing and make sure everything's fair and equitable across the board. But those are the words in our language that we'd like to share with you, because Slickstaws in our language, our community, Bonaparte First Nations, is English. Slickstaws means the people of the low-lying valley. And if you know that our territory, that's exactly where we live, in a low-lying valley. So we not only take care of the land, we take care of the animals and the people. And anybody that lives there does the same thing. And that's something that we look forward to, of building those relationships, what you're asking for, and that we consult and that we sit together and that we work together. So Cooksjam.
Cooksjam, Chief Antone. So we'll move over to 6.1 with Mr. Vieira.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, delegation, for that great presentation. So that's my presentation is really dovetailing into what you just heard. So as they mentioned, that we've been in discussions with them about proposed amendment to our solid waste plan and what our process would be. And we don't have a process built into our current plan for how an amendment would work. So that was the first thing we flagged as staff, that we want to have a board approved process. So that's what I'm going to walk through here. So they're presenting this proposal, and their the ask is that we consider a plan amendment. And what we've developed with our staff and our consulting team is what that process should be. And so what's in front of you is a recommendation to adopt a policy, or recommend to the board to adopt a policy around that process. I'm going to hop up here. So
Jamie, before you go further, I can't tell if our delegation left or not from the video. Should I be leaving as well?
you're welcome to stay if you want. Most of your delegation is still here. Chief Antoine had left.
Okay, I'll stay as well. Thank you. Bye.
So our solid waste management plan was approved by the board actually in 2017 and approved by the ministry in 2018. So just a reminder, this is a requirement of the province that regional districts adopt a solid waste management plan, and it outlines how the TNRD is going to manage all the solid waste activities within our borders. It's required under the Environmental Management Act, approved first by the board, and then it must be approved by the minister. It's a 10-year life cycle, and it's meant to be a living document, so amendments can take place at any time. So amending a plan. So as I mentioned, we currently have a 10-year plan. We do 5-year reviews. So the next scheduled amendment to the plan or a renewal of the plan won't be till 2018. But what the presentation we just heard is a request for us to amend the plan before that time. So any major or even minor amendments can occur at any time, but a major amendment would require a significant change to the plan. This would be a major amendment because it would be adding a landfill facility. So backing up, our plan approves every solid waste facility landfill in the region. So both municipal, First Nation owned landfill if it's on provincial land, or any private entity. So the most recent example is when the Campbell Hill landfill in Cache Creek was going through the same process. They came to the TNRD board and requested a plan amendment and led through a whole amendment process that lasted a couple of years, and ultimately the board approved that amendment, recommended an amendment to the minister, and the minister approved that amendment, and that facility was added to the plan. The Ministry of Environment will not issue any operating certificate to a new landfill if the regional district has not amended their plan. So it's a bit confusing because there's in the previous presentation, and they did a good job talking about it, but I still have to stop and think and wrap my head around it. There's kind of two processes that would be happening simultaneously. The Ministry of Environment has permitting requirements around a landfill, and they're the ones who ensure the technical requirements are being met before, and then incorporate those into an operational certificate. But they won't issue an operational certificate until the regional district has requested a plan amendment from the minister, and the minister has approved that plan amendment. So it's kind of a twofold process that in this proposal, trying to attempt to do simultaneously. So regional districts have the authority to establish a process around a plan amendment. And as I mentioned, they have to approve the plan. So I just want to stop there and be really clear that the ministry gives regional districts a lot of power and authority in this process. If the TNRD or any regional district board does not want to pursue a plan amendment, then a proposal like this would stop and it would not be approved through the provincial approval process. So this board, or this committee, and the board ultimately has a very key role in this process, as they did for those who were around the table 10, 15 years ago when the Campbell Hill landfill was approved. So as I mentioned in our plan, section 2.5 of our plan lists what landfills are approved. So the amendment would be adding this landfill to that list. So any and all landfill that's regulated provincially would need to be included in that plan. The only exception that I could think of would be any landfill that's on federal land that's not regulated by the province would not need a plan amendment. So for example, Tecumseh has their own landfill on federal land that's not included on our plan and doesn't fall under provincial regulation. So landfills must meet regulatory requirements and have an issued operational certificate and have an approved plan amendment or be an approved plan to operate. So what I'm going to talk about here is walk through the process that we've drafted of how we, the TNRD, would consider a plan amendment. So there's 4 major steps, and I'll kind of break those down. But to walk through this, we're talking about screening, the request process, then public consultation, then the actual approval of an amendment. So what we're proposing ensures the TNRD is still, the board is still the decision-making authority and is involved in the review and approval process, key stages throughout this. There's multiple points in the process that we're proposing where the board has authority to either reject or send the proponent back to do further information or proceed to the next step. So the first step would be a screening meeting with the proponent. So this would be a staff to proponent level discussion where we would be getting baseline information from the proponent. And then there would be a written request that the proponent would submit to staff. Staff would review that, and then staff would move forward with if it seems reasonable, would move forward with a board report and make recommendations to the board whether or not to proceed with an amendment, proceed with an amendment process to move on with this process. Part of that recommendation would be the establishment of a amendment advisory committee, a plan amendment advisory committee. Now, the reason we're recommending that is we recognize that any plan amendment, I shouldn't say any, often plan amendments would have very sort of specific impact on certain areas within the region. So this one, for example, what we would be looking at is creating a plan amendment advisory committee with representatives of that impacted area. The board we haven't developed any terms of reference as part of this policy, but then the board would approve a terms of reference for that advisory committee, and that advisory committee would be set up based on what the amendment request looks like. And just keep in the back of your mind as we're walking through this, we're creating this as a policy that not just because of this proponent that's here presenting today, but any other request that would come forward, this would be a policy that we could always refer back to. So the advisory committee, as I mentioned, would be specific to the amendment request. The elected officials from organizations and political organizations in the impacted area. We'd have technical and non-technical interests, so members of the public that would also be part of that committee. And the terms of reference would be approved by the board. So step 2 would be a preliminary application package. So this would include more detailed information from the amendment request. And then finally, a final application package, which would have more detailed information. A key piece here is that I would have to demonstrate compliance with all federal and provincial legal and regulatory requirements. Now that would include if an environmental assessment certificate has been issued, or I should back up, if it's required and if it's issued. So for example, when the Campbell Hill landfill amendment took place, the request came to the TNRD board, and the process that we followed there, which we're suggesting the same here. In that case, a environmental assessment certificate was required. So the board essentially said, once you have your environmental assessment certificate, then we'll come back to talk to us and we'll move on with the process. So they had to focus on that end of the process before the board would consider it any further. Also approvals from the local governments in terms of meeting zoning and licensing bylaws, scheduling. We'd have all the detailed information that the proponent's already working on in this case would have to be included in that package. The idea with that package, it would also be meeting and including all the technical requirements the province had. So when I mentioned this process sort of happening simultaneously, that they would be working through the regulatory process to ensure they're meeting Ministry of Environment responsibilities and regulations, and that would be included in the package that would come to this board. So once that's complete, the final application would be submitted and it would be reviewed and approved or not approved by the board. So then only after that process, then would we move on with the consultation portion. Now, they mentioned consultation in the previous presentation. Now there's consultation requirements that the ministry has as part of that operating certificate. As part of the plan amendment, we also require public consultation. And so we would lay out, they would have to present and again, this would go through the plan amendment advisory committee and then up through the board of what that public consultation plan is and would be approved through that committee and through the board what the plan would be. And then they would go ahead and implement that and come back to the committee and ultimately the board with what the consultation report was, what the findings were, what the information they received. And again, at the end of this step, the board would have the authority to either reject the process and end the process, move the process forward to the next step, or send the proponent back to do, in this case, for example, more public consultation. So the final step then would be the approval process. Once that's all complete, of actually drafting the amendment, having staff do an internal review of that amendment, finalizing the wording of that amendment, being approved by the board, and then submitting the amendment to the Minister of Environment. And once the Minister of Environment signs off on the amendment, is it actually law and in place? So in a case like this, where it's a landfill, once that amendment would be signed off, would be when they could receive an operating certificate from the province. So I kind of did that quickly. There's a lot in the draft that's in the report. I'm not going to walk through this. This is the visual that we created to help kind of basically the entire policy is tried to cram it into one page so we can walk through the process. But you'll see in that process very clearly the steps where it's kind of the pause and the TNRD has the authority to approve, reject, or send the proponent back for more information. And that's built into this process all the way through. So what we're doing now is having this up for discussion with this committee. Any input we're happy to receive, and then we'll fine tune it with any input and then bring this policy back to the board. Target would be the May 19th meeting. And then once that policy is adopted, then we could then go back to the proponents that are here today and say, here is our process to follow. We've been working with them over the last few months around just how this might work. And we have kind of consulted with the proponent on this policy and they're on board with this process and think it's a fair and reasonable process. And I should also mention this process is based on the process that we had in our previous 2008 solid waste management plan. We just didn't build a process into the 2018 plan. Therefore, that's why we're bringing it forward as an actual board policy. Oh, and finally, the costs associated with this, and again, this was in our previous process as well. The costs associated with this, as you can imagine, are not insignificant in terms of staff time and our own consultants to do the technical reviews of this information and the whole public consultation process that's required. So let me be clear, the amendment process. So when a proponent's asking to do amendment and having to do public consultation as part of that amendment, that is the TNRD actually consulting with the public. You know, we would be asking the proponent to do the heavy lifting and the work on that, but they're doing it on behalf of the TNRD as we want to amend the plan to include this facility, and the ministry is looking at that process as us leading it. So again, that's why we're being very specific on what we're going to approve and want to see move forward. But anyway, so back to the cost. So the expectation is that if someone's coming to us, a proponent's coming to the board asking to amend the plan, that they would be responsible for all the additional costs associated with that, including consultations, staff time, consultant time to those reviews. Yeah. I think that is all. Questions, discussion.
Thanks very much, Mr. Vieira. I have Director Grenier, Director Houghton. Director Grenier.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation, Jamie. Wanted to ask you specifically about liability. We've heard a lot as a new board about the liabilities that we've assumed by taking on other projects. This isn't a project we're taking on, but I'm thinking in terms of rapid infiltration basins that might potentially fail. I've had that personally, had that happen to in a situation. So it happens, and I just wondering if you have thought at all about defining liability in this process as it relates to the TNRD. And the other is the decommissioning process. Sometime in the future, landfills close, and who has the responsibilities associated with that?
That's really good question, and I guess I'll give you a sort of vague general answer. Those are all questions that we would be expecting the proponent to have clear answers on for the committee and the board to make informed decisions on. Obviously, the ministry also has their very specific requirements about those. But for example, the board may, and through this public consultation process, there may be additional requests or requirements that the board would set for a project based on the community consultation and concerns. From a liability point of view, the liability of actually operating the facility would fall on the operator of the landfill. So TNRD wouldn't be directly liable for the operations of the landfill, but in terms of sort of the overall impact to the region, that's really where the board would need to consider what's the benefit to the region, what's the risk to the region, what does the public in the area think, what are the other stakeholders in the area feel about it. So it's a very big question, a valid question.
Supplementary to that, I appreciate that. I'm just wondering in your analysis of that or discussions with that, if we could get an indemnity agreement, quite apart from answering the question of liability, that would then probably dictate an indemnity agreement so that if anything did happen, it would be clear as to who the responsibility was, or more specific, it wouldn't be the TNRD's responsibility if an indemnity agreement is in place, if that's appropriate.
Yeah, it's a good comment. I mean, we have to, I guess, just confirm from a legal point of view whether that's necessary or not, but I think it's a good comment.
I have Director Houghton and Director Sarai. Director Houghton.
Thank you, Chair Stamer. Jamie, if this project goes ahead, could you foresee the redirection of our landfill materials that we have in our areas to the north of Cache Creek up into Clinton and out that way and out towards Spence's Bridge and back towards Savinaw? The redirection of our TNRD depot materials. I know trucking's a big expense to go to that particular landfill if it goes ahead.
That's a very good question. I guess the answer is yes, it's a possibility. Currently, all our solid waste we generate in the Western TNRD is going to the existing landfill in Cache Creek, the Campbell Hill landfill, which is next door to this proposed facility. But we'd always be looking, I mean, we are a commercial customer of that existing Campbell Hill landfill. We could look at other options and consider that and impact the budget and benefit overall to the taxpayer.
Thank you.
Director Sarai.
Thank you, Chair Stamer. Just on the public engagement piece, first of all, I think the regulations they've presented, the province presents to them is going to be stringent. Being a counselor on the city of Kamloops, we know I've dealt with it being the chair of the Civic Ops Committee, and I'm satisfied that all the rules and regulations that put before them, they will meet them. So I will move the recommendation. But my comment to the proponents coming back to the board, I put a lot of weight in communications and engagement with your local area neighbors and municipal governments. We always seem to rely on governments for policy and regulations, but we forget the impact on neighboring communities, whether it's a social housing site or a landfill. And sometimes those engagements come out, the concerns come out that can be addressed right at the door or through a dialogue, and they don't have to come here. But when we don't engage, those come before a board or a city council, and they become an issue where it shouldn't be. So I'm just throwing that out there, that could be a great piece to make sure that those concerns are addressed before they come to the board for the next piece.
Thank you. So I have a motion by Director Sarai, second by Director Smith. Sorry, I'm looking at Blackwell. I'm thinking that's not right. I have a question to Mr. Vieira. Mr. Brown was mentioning about the organics and we had talked off camera on this. Can you see that being a benefit for us going forward with our changes to our solid waste management plan?
Short answer is yes. Any organics facility, opportunities for processing that material could be a benefit to our existing operations. I will say our current solid waste management plan, the priority for curbside collection of organics is in the city of Kamloops and in Sun Peaks. But it also says in our plan that we want to pursue organic separation wherever possible. There is an existing organics processing facility in that Cache Creek area, but an additional facility, again, it's similar to Director Houghton's question. They're a business out there, and we would consider every option and check the impact and the benefit of using those different options that are out there.
Is there any more questions to staff? All right, I have a motion on the floor to adopt the recommendation that we recommend the board of directors adopt the draft regional solid waste management plan amendment policy. I'll call the question. All in favor? Contrary? That's passed. Thank you. Next up is proposed automated refuge and recyclable collection bylaw 2794. Mr. Vieira.
All right, I won't speak much. I just want to introduce Martin Dixon. For those who haven't met him, he's our environmental services coordinator. He focuses on implementation of our solid waste plan, also is responsible for the administration of our curbside collection, both in Cherry Creek and the Blue River area. And he will present from here.
All right, thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Chair Stamer. This morning, I just want to introduce the TNRE's curbside automated refuse and recyclables program that we have in electoral areas B and J. And I'd also like to just go through some of the high level pieces to the proposed bylaw. So the background to this this bylaw is that since 2009, the TNRD has operated two automated refuse and recyclable curbside collection programs. And the first one that I'll discuss is the one that was set up in electoral area B, so servicing Blue River and Avola. It got going through the alternative waste collection service establishment bylaw process. And it's operated through taxation, and the key costs are the costs that go to the contractor, collection vehicle costs, repairs, fuel carts, the annual calendar, so all the outreach, and insurance. This service is extended to 126 collection points. We set a baseline of weekly refuse and recycling collection, where customers get one 240-liter recyclables cart and one 240-liter wildlife resistant refuse cart. Commercial customers, in my slide, it suggests that they get one 360-liter wildlife resistant refuse cart, but when we were rolling the program out, it was essentially what they needed to meet their needs. For those commercial customers that generate larger volumes, we encourage them to again work with a wildlife resistant container that comes in 2, 4, and 6 cubic yard sizes. This is the collection area. On the left, you've got Avola, and it extends south to Otter Creek, as indicated in the inset in the lower left. And then on the right, you've got Blue River, and that extends to the north up to Alberta Lodge and Bone Creek Wilderness Resort. And those are seasonal properties. So Alberta, it's a Mike Wigley ski operation, and so that facility receives service during the winter. These two pictures here are examples of the wildlife resistant containers. So on the left, you've got likely a 4 to 6 cubic yard container that hooks up to the truck and it tips. On the right, you've got the wildlife resistant carts that are offered to residential properties as well as commercial properties that don't generate a lot. And so I'll talk to those clips that you see on the right later on in this discussion. Electoral Area J, curbside refuse and recyclables collection program extends from Cherry Creek through Tobiano to Savannah. That was established in 2010, again through an alternative waste collection services establishment bylaw process. And again, the revenue to run this operation is through taxation, and those monies go to contractor costs, the truck, the repairs, fuel, carts, again, annual calendars and insurance. This is a larger site, pardon me, this is a larger collection area. It started out a bit smaller for sure. And we've seen, significant growth in the last number of years, specifically in Tobiano. And so similar to Electoral Area B, this collection area gets weekly refuse and recyclables collection. And again, this is just baseline. Again, 240 liter carts are offered to customers. And then in the commercial side, my mistake, it notes 1 360 liter refuse cart. But again, when we were distributing the carts back in 2010, it was essentially based on the commercial properties needs. And this is the collection area. You can see in the lower right, the Greenstone Mountain area, and then the collection area extending essentially to the west end of Kamloops Lake. And this program, if it wasn't clear, is solely reliant on curbside carts, not containers. So we've had a while to observe this program. They're both small collection areas, so we've been able to work with residents, commercial customers, essentially on a one by one basis. Like if there were any concerns, we engaged those customers through social media, unaddressed ad mail, direct mail, kind of informal approaches over time. So yeah, we've essentially created a wish list. And so by drafting this proposed bylaw, it's our attempt to try and be able to manage these consistently across the two collection programs. This wish list is also generated through discussion with the contractors that we work with, as well as the collection vehicle drivers, as well as colleagues in other jurisdictions. There were a lot of resources that were referenced when we were drafting this. I've got 10 here. I'll give you a moment to have a look, but they're from other regional districts and municipalities, some municipalities within the TNRD. So yeah, we added to our wish list by cherry picking some of the key pieces from these bylaws. So high level items that we address in the bylaw is essentially the criteria, the collection criteria. So setting out carts, when they need to be set out, what happens the event you don't get your cart out in time and you miss servicing, the materials that are permitted in the refuse containers and in the recyclables containers. That's a big one for us because it allows us to manage our incoming waste. It allows us to meet our obligations to the province in running our landfills. It allows us to, respect our own bylaws and City of Kamloops bylaws. These refuse, these loads of refuse essentially come into Mission Flats at the end of the day, so that's an important piece. As well as our agreements with Recycle BC, who we're a collection partner with. It allows us to define the service level. So just like we have expectations of customers, the customers can expect us to deliver too, like in the collection criteria, making sure that, we're getting the collection vehicle driver is getting out and servicing these properties on time. And then a really cool piece that we've also brought forward is the accessibility piece. So folks with medical or physical limitations can apply to the general manager of operations. For their containers to be brought to the streetscape and set back when it's tipped. And then being two collection areas that are quite rural, we wanted to introduce the wildlife attractant piece. So in efforts to reduce the human wildlife component. And going back to the recycle piece, the Recycle BC piece, there are obligations for us to inspect our recyclables and report back to Recycle BC. So this gives the TNRD the authority to get into those containers and see that, ensure the purity standards. And this is a shot from our electoral area J service area, collection area. So through this process, it's allowed us to look at our collection area boundaries. Going back to 2009, we had a defined area. Over time, those areas have conceivably grown. And so we're just working with the collection vehicle driver to verify that, and then we'll report back to the GIS section. And these aren't big swaths of lands. These are just properties that are, slightly outside of the collection area. As mentioned before, this bylaw would allow us to determine what goes into the containers. So we provide a banned material schedule in the bylaw that's quite extensive, and I would say is current with a lot of the inquiries from the board, like agricultural plastics and boat wrap, and we just wanted to be keen on that. It sets the frequency. So again, that baseline of weekly refuse and recycling collection. And if there were any variations, that would be brought to the general manager of operations for consideration to add days. It presents the seasonal set out rates. So going back to the human wildlife conflict piece, we would have a period of time where customers aren't allowed to set out their containers overnight or before 5 a.m. Which is a big one for us, because again, the collection areas are quite rural. This is the piece about the collection criteria. So being out by 7 a.m., being off the streetscape by 7 p.m., ensuring that the orientation of the cart or the containers is easy to access for the collection vehicle driver, so that they don't have to hop out of their vehicle to reconfigure and then tip. It establishes the number of carts a residential or commercial property is eligible to receive. And I'll get into the commercial piece specifically a little later in this slide deck. Just for reference, residential properties are issued one refuse container and one recycling container. And beyond that, they can make requests. And if the application is approved, then we'll distribute more. It clarifies the expectations of the management of TNRD assets. So we have these carts out in these rural areas, and we just want to make sure that, they're being maintained, they're being brought off the streetscape so that, they don't get hit by a snowplow, or, if they're out overnight, they're not getting ripped open by a bear, or, if the collection vehicle driver has to get out and do something with his truck, or maybe reconfigure the container, he's not dealing with the byproducts of a meat production business. And these kind of situations do occur. So that's a really key piece. It protects the health and wellness of the collection vehicle driver, which is big for us. And throughout the bylaw, it references the general manager of operations and his or her designate to make these authorizations. This is the piece that we were talking about earlier, the medical set-out rate for those with medical or physical limitations. So there is criteria to qualify for it. So the resident would have to be at that property. I mean, it has to be documented that there is a physical disability or condition that allows them from moving their carts from their home to the streetscape. And they need to provide evidence that there's no able-bodied people within that home. This was a really good one because I mean, it defined, I guess it aligned with the Recycle BC collection agreement that we have. It allows us to call out the properties that we do have the authority to collect from. So single family dwellings, secondary suites, duplexes. At this time, Recycle BC would require us to update our master services agreement and curbside statement of work to include multi-unit complexes. But that's something that through the application process could be brought to the general manager of operations, and we could potentially amend that contract. Also, two big pieces are new builds and park model recreational units. So, you know, a property owner may have, you know, a piece of property that they're developing on, but they're living in their park model recreational unit or recreational vehicle, and they want containers. Yeah, they would need to have a certificate of occupancy in order to get those containers. Yeah, and then this is this piece that people are always scratching their head about. Why, you know, I'm a commercial customer. Why can't I get recycling? Well, going back to the Recycle BC agreement, at this time, we're not able to collect. But that's not to say that that's forever. It is on the Ministry of Environment's radar that this is a big problem in local governments. And so conceivably in the next iteration of their stewardship plan, that may be addressed. And then, yeah, earlier I mentioned the commercial property piece and the distribution of refuse containers. So the TNRD has the collection vehicle that can service carts, not front loading bins. And so the TNRD would propose that 5 350 liter commercial carts would be issued to a commercial source. And beyond that, that's when you get into the realm of front loading bins that a private hauler would offer. And then for financial implications, this isn't a revenue generator. You know, there may be some fees that come in from the replacement of containers, you know, that are stolen, pardon me, lost or damaged due to owner negligence. And so, yeah, that money would be used to offset the cost for purchasing new carts and parts. Thank you.
Thanks very much for the presentation. I have a quick question. When you were showing that slide with the up to five carts allowed, are we charging for the 5 all the time, or are they having to keep track? How does that work?
That would be kept track. So yeah, we wouldn't charge, we would distribute. Yeah, we would issue that to the commercial source.
But again, are we charging 5 at a time, or just whatever they put out at the curb?
So I could jump in on
defer to
that.
Jamie on
This curbside collection service is a bit unique compared to how it usually works in municipalities, where municipalities it's actually utility and you're paying for that specific service. Our services doesn't work that way. It's a taxation base, so you're actually just paying based on assessment for the service. So there's not you pay X amount for 1 cart and X amount for 2 carts. That's why it's a challenge, because all commercial properties are paying into. So what we're trying to do here is have a reasonable level of service we're providing to commercial, while still recognize that the whole intent of the service is residential collection and business collection for MSW, like household type garbage. is what we're doing. So the 5 carts is actually the maximum. It's really not to say we're going to give everyone 5. Sometimes we have requests, we want 15 or 20. And then we wanted to just set a max ceiling. And this, I should also point out, this is actually specific, the five carts is specific to Savinaw, where in Blue River, we have a different scenario in area B where we require a hydraulic bear-proof collection cart for businesses.
Director Grenier?
Thank you, Chair. I have several questions related to the commercial, but I'll just start with an easy question, which is the 7 a.m. start time. At Tobiano and in Cherry Creek, I think the start time right now is 8 a.m. And at Tobiano, the strata corporations at Tobiano encourage people not to put their garbage out in the evening to be ready to be picked up. So if we are moving something from 8 a.m. to 7 a.m., I think we're in conflict with that.
So we set 7 a.m. as to set in the bylaw, that's the earliest time we're going to start. We're not going to start collection anytime before that. When it actually gets collected will be depending on the route and where it is. So I don't know if there's any anticipated changes in the actual collection time for Tobiano or not.
No, to your point, that would be 7 o'clock would be the earliest.
So is 7 o'clock right now the earliest? Because I was under the understanding it was 8 in Cherry Creek.
You're right, it is 8.
Okay, so is there a rationale behind moving it an hour up? Because that might be problematic for people.
Yeah, I guess just to be consistent with other municipalities, and to have the collection take place earlier in the day. That would be my response to that question.
I'm just wondering if there's any kind of way we could consult with the residents to see if that's an issue for them.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable comment that we can look into. I guess what our planned collection schedule is, if we're planning on changing it or not. I would echo Martin's comments that we want to just bring it in line with other bylaws where we have the flexibility to start that early if need be. To make the whole collection run done and then back to the landfill in time prior to closing.
And sorry, not to belabor it, but some people in Cherry Creek have driveways upwards of 1 kilometer long, so they're trying to do something with these cans during the week. Some people leave them out at the end, some people don't. And so when you're thinking about the middle of winter, 7 a.m., trying to clear the driveway and get the garbage out and all the rest of it, that might just be an issue that hour. So I just throw that out there in your consideration of how we would consult that.
Thank you, Director Grenier. Director Onslow.
Thank you for that. And I also actually agree with you, Director Grenier, because our pickup time, I believe, is 8 a.m. And like my bin doesn't get out at 7 in the morning ever. So that's it. Yeah, like if we could keep the collection time the same, that would be ideal even for in Blue River. Otherwise, we are going to run into the issue that people are putting them out at night and the bears are getting into the bins at night. That's my opinion on that. And then I just wanted some clarification on the very beginning slide. It said Blue River Area B's service was established in 2009 by the TNOD, but I'm under the impression that the improvement district ran the collection service up until last year. So just, I'm not sure if you guys established it and then they took it over, or if you've taken it over, or how that went down.
Yeah, so that's a good question. It'd be good for this committee to be aware. So the improvement district had its own service for garbage collection up until 2008. So they ran it directly through their own ability to collect taxation. In 2008, it was expanded to an electoral area wide service, and it became a TNRD service that we collect taxes for. However, at that time and up until last year, we contracted the improvement district as our collection contractor. So it was still a TNRD service, but they were our contractor.
Director Grenier.
Thank you, Chair. These questions are related to the commercial in Savanaugh and Tobiano and the 5 bins. I know at Tobiano, the roadways where the current garbage for commercial, particularly the restaurant at the Tobiano Golf Course, there's a very large container at the back for the recycles. That's not something that we're getting into, but I presume that a vehicle is going to have to get in somewhere in that neighborhood also for these bins. So it might make some sense to look at the logistics of where the bins are being stored and where we would like, if we're going to go in and pick them up, where we would want those bins to be brought out to. That's an issue. I know at least at Tobiano. I don't know if you're thinking about the Savanaugh restaurant area. The other thing is the frequency, because one is a restaurant, well, because there's 2 restaurants, one in Savanaugh, one at Tobiano, the frequency of pickup or the frequency of use might require those 5 bins. And is there an equity between 5 commercial size bins and residential pickup in your cost sharing formula and relative to the taxation of commercial versus residential?
Yeah, through the chair, that's the challenging scenario with having it as a taxation service and not an actual fee for service. What we're not doing is we're not looking at the assessment and determining how many carts you get based on how much tax you pay. So we're trying to come up with a reasonable service level for businesses and residential properties. So I guess the direct answer to your question is no, we're not looking at how much they're paying in taxation, determining their service, but in general, businesses pay more taxation into it. And so we want to continue to provide a level of service to them within reason in what we're able to do with a residential style collection truck. As Martin mentioned, we don't have a front load truck to provide that level of service. We can't provide, wood waste collection for the mill in Savanaugh, even though they pay into it, but we do have a couple carts there where their office garbage gets picked up by our cart. Use that as an example.
Director Grenier, do you have specific, because I know it's your jurisdiction, and I certainly want to give you all the opportunity to ask these questions. Is there anything specific that you want changed in this draft?
Well, I don't have specifics, but I have concerns, and you've just touched on it. And I was just wondering, as a solution, would it make sense to have a parallel commercial bylaw as opposed to the residential, and then a portion when we see what the costs are to venture into this commercial and the 5 bins and whatever it is, maybe that is applicable just to the commercial assessment in those areas, and then the residentials just to the residential assessment. Then you do the apportionment of the garbage truck and the pickup as between those 2 bylaws, and we don't try to mix those 2 together. That might be a solution to what is this cost, and is 5 the right number of bins? So that's an idea.
Can I add to that too? Just, is it only once weekly for pickup of the commercial, or is it twice?
Twice in Savanaugh businesses, yep.
I'm saying it's because barrier is the same. We've identified some of the issues, particularly with storage and like you said, from some of the refuge from the restaurants and those kinds of things. So we've adapted the plan. So I'm hoping that that's your line of questioning, is in that flexibility, Director Grenier?
I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity to come back with some of these things after you've had a chance to consider these questions, rather than adopt it right away. I get the need that you want some direction, but I'm just thinking that these specific points might need a little massaging.
Yes,
If-
go ahead.
If
Thanks.
I may, just with regards to your comment about a separate bylaw for commercial and one for residential and different rates that may apply. I don't know that we can do that. We have a service area that we tax the service area, and the rates are already established. So I don't know if that would be even feasible unless you looked at a separate billing for them.
Yeah,
Guerrero?
so to add to that, I guess the other model that we haven't considered in this bylaw, but that could be considered is ending the electoral area wide service completely and entering into a utility type service where we're billing the fee for service. You get an invoice once a year or quarterly for garbage collection, and we have different commercial and residential rates. That's how most larger municipalities work. That's how it works in the city of Kamloops. We haven't proposed that here. I mean, that is an option on the table. That if you know, this committee wants us to pursue that as a completely different model. That's how we could achieve that activity where you get what you pay for.
Director Grenier?
Well, my question is to you, in Barrier, do you bill separately?
Absolutely, we always have. So I think, I mean, I'm not sure what your commercial customers are doing, but that's why I asked the question about the 5 bins. Is that you pay specifically on what is being removed, when it's being removed. That's how we do it. And it's a small community, but we also do recycling as well. We were the first ones to do it in the TNRD in this municipality under 5,000. So I'm not sure, we're not trying to add a bunch of work for staff, but I mean, that is the fair way of doing it. I really appreciate the TNRD going out the extra level with that the inaccessibility, because we don't offer that. But I'm sure that's something that we could certainly look for even in Barrier with the few number of people that even have trouble getting their refuge to the curb. I think that's a great idea. I think it's a really good, point, but as for this concept, that's why I was I'm sorry, I was ignorant on the fact that I just took it for granted that everybody was paying specifically. If you've got a duplex and, I understand it's under the taxation, but if you've got 2 bins, you pay for 2 bins. You've got 1 bin, you pay for 1 bin. So I'm not sure where this leads us in this bylaw and any future bylaws. I guess the answer question would be to staff. You said you haven't looked at that model, but is it something that you would be looking at in the future? If we adopt this, do we have the flexibility, Jamie, to, look at this again in a year and say, yes, we've now determined that it makes more sense to start charging per basis, or, where would you like this to go?
So to the second question, yes, if this is adopted, it doesn't mean we can't look at changing the service in the future. This is just to give us sort of a bylaw to lean on. Essentially, what we're putting in the bylaw is what we've been doing up to this point, but we've never actually had it regulated. So if someone wanted to challenge it, we didn't have it in bylaw. So that's the process we're trying to do right now. I think it's a bigger and more complicated discussion if we're talking about moving away from the electoral area wide service. And I'm happy to have that discussion with the area directors that have this service in their area, because there's a lot of things to consider around the impacts to taxation and what the costs would be to individual residents and businesses if we move to a different model. Electoral area J is more complicated as well, because there's properties outside the service area that, instead of getting curbside collection, have access to transfer stations and fees that are funded through the electoral area service. So it's definitely something we could look at, but I think it warrants more discussion of whether or not the directors from area J and B are in favor of us moving forward and doing more legwork on that. So I think that's a separate issue to discuss down the road.
Well, I can certainly appreciate the amount of work the staff has put in this to get us to where we are. And I'd like to ask for a motion for the recommendation, and then we can continue with that with our discussion. Director Stankey, Director Smith. Okay, any more discussion? Director Grenier?
Yes, thank you. Continuing on with the commercial pickup, you mentioned the boat wrap, and there's 200 slips at the Tobiano Marina, and that's potentially 200 boat wraps. Is this commercial pickup envisioning this, or should we be saying that's not something that you can put in that container?
Yeah, it's something that we'd be saying, please don't put it in the container, because it puts us out of compliance with Recycle BC. That's essentially what it is.
Director Grenier, I know you're thinking,
Yeah.
and I want to give you all the opportunity you can, because again, like I commented, I think we all agree, staff has done an excellent job putting this bylaw together, particularly with the restrictions and how this is going to operate. But I also appreciate the candor of the staff allowing us the flexibility as we move forward with this, if there has to be changes made, the staff will be willing to be able to listen, particularly from the electoral directors. And if there are substantial changes to be made, they can be, either made by staff, brought back to the committee, the board. So where do you feel on that? Director Grenier?
Well, I agree. You've put a lot of work and effort into this, and it's not my intention to upset an apple cart. I'm really concerned that we haven't maybe quite captured the commercial, or don't have the flexibility within the way you've written this policy now. So I'm quite fine moving forward if there is, say, an amendment to look at the commercial and ensure that there's some equity in the application of the costs in some fashion. I don't have the wording for that, but I was hoping that we could put some kind of an amendment to it so that they have the direction to do that. Staff has the direction to do that, but we can also move forward with this policy. And I would also ask to amend the time to 8 o'clock. That would give a lot of our constituents some comfort, I think.
Thanks very much, Director Grenier. To staff, what would you do with that request?
With regards to the timing wise, we're, I think, okay with that. We'll just have to confirm offline, but we can look at we obviously, if that's an amendment this committee wants to add in, we'd be okay with that. Moving the 7 a.m. to the 8 a.m. collection. Regarding the equity and cost piece, I guess I'm still confused of how we can make that work, because the service is not set up that way. It's you pay based on assessment, just like all of our electoral area-wide services.
So can I ask, what is the issue?
The issue is that the size of the 5 bins in relation to the equity of the residential bins, I suppose there's a mathematical formula. You could say this has this capacity, this is the frequency of the pickup. A bin, a commercial bin is equivalent to this in a residential bin, and then make that kind of an apportionment. And then multiply that times 5. So because those commercial pickups, if it's say, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
The difference though in assessment rates between residential and commercial are significantly different though. So that may factor in exactly what you're saying. I guess we'd have to do the math, but that, I think to Jamie's point, it's going to take a lot of work to shift this entire service to something different, where it's fee-based versus assessment-based. So we would need to work on that, I would assume, and propose that maybe for 2024 or something like that.
And quite possibly, if I may add, there may be a direct difference between residential and commercial, where you split the commercial apart, where commercial is specifically on what they are getting picked up and residential stays the same. Because maybe that's what the residents would like, and maybe it's easier to do it that way because it doesn't cause a problem. I have Director Sarai, Director Smith, Director Roden, and then back to Director Grenier. Director Sarai.
Thank you, Chair Stamer. I'm just a little bit unknown because I don't know all the area directors that are affected by this collection. But what I wouldn't want to do is make a big drastic decision here as a committee without the rest of the board being aware of the work that we're going to demand on our staff. If it's just going to input 1 or 2 areas, I'd rather send it to the board to see if we're going to go down that avenue before I make any drastic decisions here.
Director Smith.
Thank you, Chair Stamer. I had the same thought as I moved the recommendation to move forward with the bylaw, but if the desire, and it sounds like this basically affects area J and B. So if the desire of those 2 area directors is not to have it within a bylaw and to go with a fee for service model, then I don't know that maybe this is not what the directors would like to see. So I'm obviously have to vote for it since I moved it, but I just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
I think, thank you, Director Smith. I think for clarity, I think what staff is saying though is that we need this bylaw because we don't have the tools necessary to actually do the service. And what they're also saying is that if there's going to be a change in the flexibility on how we're going to charge the ratepayers, whether it's going to be from a taxation mode, or like I suggested, maybe split the residential and the commercial apart, so the commercial is totally separate. And that can also change the frequency where residential stays once a week and possibly commercials twice a week, you know, those kinds of things. And then residential can feel that they aren't helping subsidize a commercial operation because the commercial is paying strictly on their own. I would think that it's important for us to at least get this bylaw to the board, to at least give the tools to staff, and then we can always move forward and make changes as we go. That would just be my point on that. Director Roden.
Thank you. I just would be a bit cautious about trying to split hairs too finely. In Ashcroft, everyone who owns a home pays the same service to get your garbage picked up, whether you're putting one little tiny bag in there every week because you are assiduous in doing your recycling, or whether you're filling it to the brim so much that the lid can't even come down. So to be absolutely fair, the person who is really great, Anne McKeag, who recycles things I didn't know you could recycle, and who puts her bin out twice a month, maybe, she could come down to the village office and say, well, why am I paying as much for my garbage collection as next door, who's got 3 kids? And every week they can't even cram everything into their bin. That's not fair. So I'm just using it as a cautionary tale. Life is not entirely fair. And using the size of the bins as a comparison, well, 5 commercial bins equals X number of whatever. Who knows what's in those bins? So it's kind of a false, it's almost a straw man, because you can't necessarily compare, because you might have someone with their residential bin that's hardly got anything in it because they recycle, they do the right thing.
If I can make a point though, and I'm using Barry as an example, is that there's still a minimum charge for that service, whether you have half a bag or a full bag, or half a container or a full container. And so you've got to have flexibility in those opportunities. And that's why we've aggressively gone with recycling in our community, because it's reduced the amount it's costing us into the landfill and our tipping fees. So there is still a basic, same as water, you know, whether you use enough for just this or for a basic amount for a household of 4, there's a basic, you know, charge for that service. And I think that's already occurring on the taxation basis, right? I think that's already occurring. Where it seems like there's a bit of a disconnect is on the commercial side of things. And if I was a resident there, I would want commercial and residential separate, because there would be, to me, it looks like if I was a resident, I'm helping subsidize the commercial, even though the tax rates are different. That would be what the perception to me would be. So I would recommend that we just allow staff the flexibility with this new bylaw, take it to the board, see what the board has to say, carry on with this. And if there's changes that have to be made, it can be brought back to this committee and we can make those changes. In the meantime, the 2 main electoral directors that are involved, they can have input with staff and fine tune it. I totally agree with the 8 o'clock, because I don't know how many people are going to want to get out there early. And as a side note, we also allow seniors a discount on ours, specifically because a lot of them don't create the same amount of refuge, and they also recycle more. So just as a point to Director Roden, we allow that as well. Director Grenier.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the other directors for that insight. I would be, as one of the area directors, I would be fine moving forward with this as it's proposed now. And I hear Director Roden, you know, the issue of bins, and you're not going to get perfect equity. I used to run that restaurant, and I know the costs for just the recyclables and the frequency of pickup of just the recyclables. So I'm saying to staff, why don't we use this next year as a measurement of what our actual experience is? Maybe do a quick calculation and just to confirm to yourself what the bins would be equivalent to in residential, but look at what the real world experience is. Come back with any recommendations based on the real world experience, because the objective here is to service both commercial and residential constituents fairly. That's really at the end of the day what we're trying to do. So that would be my comment.
Thank you very much, Director Grenier. Can we count that as a friendly amendment for the 8 o'clock on that, on 2794? Director Sarai, Director Smith?
Just a question of staff. Starting time for staff, though, would that put them into overtime? They've got a route to cover. Now you're changing your union's hours of work. Is that something that's just gonna go over well?
No, the actual intent is the operations weren't going to change from what they currently are. And we just were, the 7 AM was giving us that flexibility in the bylaw that we need to start it early, but there was no intent to actually change our operations.
Then Chair, I'm fine with the friendly amendment.
Director Smith? Yes. Any more discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? Contrary? It's passed. Thanks very much for the lively discussion.
Thank you.
All right, so alternate options to share sheds concept. There's a report from Mr. Vieira. Oh, from Adriana. Hi.
Hello, thank you. I hope there's as much lively discussion on this topic. I feel like it's a little bit lighter, but thank you very much. Hi, everybody. I'm Adriana, manager of solid waste and recycling. And today I'll be providing research to you that staff have undertaken on alternative use programs. Oh, we'll just need to switch our presentation over. Yeah. While she gets that loaded up, I'll just start with the overview of the background. So what I'll be sharing with you, calling them alternative use programs, and these are programs to facilitate the reuse of goods in our local communities. In 2022, at the Regional Solid Waste Committee, there was discussion on share sheds. Share sheds are buildings where people can drop off usable goods, and then other folks can go shopping. If they find something they like, they can take that item. The TNRD has never operated official share sheds in the regional district. Prior to 2015, there were a few unofficial share areas at some of our transfer station sites, but those were started by local attendants and not actually authorized for operation by TNRD staff. So in 2015, research was undertaken to look at the status of share sheds in British Columbia. And as a result of the feedback we received from other regional districts who operated the service, the board of directors at the time recommended that we not establish share sheds in the TNRD. Since that time, the topic has come up over the years. So in 2022, staff brought to this committee an updated share shed report. So we resurveyed everybody from 2015 to look at the status of share sheds, and overall found a 46% reduction in the service being operated by regional districts who were offering them in 2015 when we did that original information collection. So when we presented that report in the fall of 2022, this committee directed staff to look at alternative options to share sheds. So that's the research I'll be sharing with you today. So for this information gathering, we surveyed 13 local governments in British Columbia, and here are the programs that we found were operating. So we found being offered were waste reduction program grants, repair cafes, promotion and assistance for local private thrift stores or reuse stores, and the facilitation of community garage sales. And the whole basis of these programs is to shift from a linear model to a circular model in our economy. So in the linear model, we see that we extract resources, we make products, and then we put them in the landfill where they stay. So there ends their useful life. Whereas in the circular model, you can repair those goods, reuse them, remanufacture them, or recycle them to keep the goods flowing in the circular economy model. So that's what we're trying to support here, or what these programs are trying to support. So the first one I'll talk about is grant programs. So these are initiatives that help support the goals and objectives of a regional district solid waste management plan, where funding is made available for innovative projects that contribute to reducing waste and assisting the regional district in meeting its waste disposal per capita goal. And the Regional District of North Okanagan, they offer a $50,000 annual grant, which is called Rethink Waste, for projects as part of this program. Eligible projects include things like events, different processes that would result in waste reduction, technologies, arts can be eligible, culture displays, and any method that contributes to reducing waste and supporting the development of a localized circular economy. So they're really wanting to put that money into establishing programs that benefit the regional district and benefit their local communities. Some examples of projects include community sharing initiatives, reducing food waste, collecting reusable materials, completing research projects, waste reduction education events, product repair events or courses, so similar to the Repair Cafe idea that I'll talk about next, policy amendment ideas, and waste reduction equipment development. I'll give an overview and then I think we can probably talk about those different ideas at the end, but if you have any questions along the way, I can also answer them. The next initiative is a Repair Cafe, and this is a free meeting place or an event with a focus on fixing items to extend their useful life and their enjoyment. So events require a volunteer specialist on hand who can help people repair their item, basic tools and materials to complete those repair tasks. And the events allow people to learn important skills on how to actually do the minor repairs themselves and keep items from ending up in the landfill. So common items that come into these events are things like bicycles, toasters, hair dryers, household appliance type products. And the focus is really on teaching people the skills that they need to be able to do those types of repairs themselves. And often there's content and literature available as well that people can peruse while they wait, where they can learn information on doing those easy repairs as well. So we see 2 local governments right now that are supporting or offering repair cafes in their areas. And they facilitate the event, but the event is actually usually run by a volunteer group or a nonprofit association. And we find that in larger communities, there are repair cafe events that are organized independently by local nonprofit societies. And in Kamloops, this event is offered by the Transition Kamloops Network. And last year, there was a great partnership between Transition Kamloops Network and the TNRD library system, where they hosted a repair cafe at the North Shore Library. And at that event, they were specifically focused on repairing children's toys. All right, the next initiative is promoting private thrift stores and targeted reuse campaigns. So for this initiative, local governments will advertise thrift stores and the more of the idea of using a thrift store on the platforms that they have access to. So including local radio stations, social media channels, the regional district's website, and advertising in local newspapers. And the goal of this strategy is to bring awareness and increase community knowledge of their local reuse options to help support that secondhand economy. Typically, like I mentioned, you'll see the advertising being focused on shifting people's mindsets to reuse prior to disposal, just to keep that forefront in their mind. And sometimes you'll see larger funding go towards like a targeted use campaign where you're spending more money on the advertising, but hoping for greater uptake in the community. So I'd like to mention on that note that we've recently updated the TNRD website, and it now has a dedicated reuse page where we have organized it by community in the TNRD. Each community has a drop-down menu where you can find your local thrift store, and it links to the store, and it will also link you over to the community Facebook page. We definitely see with the use of Facebook that there are a lot of community groups that are dedicated to buying and selling, trading, exchanging community information. So we have highlighted those on this webpage for folks who might be looking for where the best one is to use in their local area. So I'd encourage you as well to check that out. If there's anything that we've missed, please let us know. We've tried to capture everybody. All right, the next one is garage sales or trunk sales. So these are reuse events that are organized and operated directly by or in partnership with a local government. Garage sale events can be across a community or in a specific neighborhood. And a trunk sale actually is a similar concept, but a different model where people would come together in a parking lot, bring all the stuff that they're looking to sell and get rid of. You've got hours of operation for that event from, let's say, 10 until 2. And then when the event is over, there's typically an organization on hand who could accept donations for folks who aren't wanting to take their goods back home with them. So yeah, you can donate it at the end of the event if you wish to. One of the leaders in the trunk sale realm was the Regional District of Central Okanagan. So they hosted their event annually and it became really, really successful. And they've now handed the keys over to community-led organizers. So their last trunk sale was in 2022, but the event will continue on, just not operated by the Regional District of Central Okanagan. We also found a bit of a different model that was interesting, and there was good discussion about this at the PMAC meeting on April 3rd. And this is an event called Trash to Treasure. This is hosted by the Regional District of Kootenay Boundary, and it's an event that takes place twice per year where residents can set unwanted household items at the curb for the day. The Regional District provides a downloadable lawn sign on the website that people can print out and then put out on their lawn to advertise their participation. And then they say that the event should be, that it's over by 4 o'clock, please bring your stuff off the curb. And there's no separate collection run to collect any unwanted things. So simply just facilitating that date and then providing some materials that can assist people in participating. All right, the next one is tipping fee exemptions or credits. So of course, we want to support our thrift stores. They're doing great work in that circular economy model. But unfortunately, they do deal with the donation of unusable materials or things that they can't actually sell, which can be a financial burden to them, as well as folks, unfortunately, dumping at the donation area, sometimes after hours, or just leaving garbage there that they have to deal with, again, creating that financial burden for them. So to support specifically nonprofit societies, there are tipping fee exemptions or credits that are in place right now. So we offer that program currently, and so does the Regional District of Fraser-Fort George. We have them set up as a bit of a different model, but they're, achieving the same goal. In the Regional District of Fraser-Fort George, they've set an annual exemption limit of up to 25 tons of waste for a registered nonprofit charity. So there's an application process. Once they're approved and they have to set up an account, they can charge their waste to that account up to 25 tons of material. And in the TNRD, we implemented a $500 annual credit for registered nonprofit organizations to help support them with, again, the donation of the things that they can't sell and the illegal dumping of material at their drop-off center. And currently, right now, we've got 5 hospital auxiliary reuse stores that are part of this credit program. So what we find overall is that local governments are utilizing a variety of alternative use programs to support reuse. If you look at the attachment that has the chart laid out showing the regional districts that we surveyed and the types of programs that they're offering, we find most of them are offering 2 to 3 of programs that I've just gone over in this presentation. And we find that, well, urban areas with higher population densities, they have a community-driven secondhand economy. It can be more difficult for small rural communities, and they might benefit from the regional district facilitating some of the programs that I've just highlighted. So yeah, we find that while we are making efforts in this area, there are some interesting new programs that we've learned about from this research. I'd like to highlight that currently our budget for waste reduction programs is just under $350,000, and our funds are currently allocated to support our current initiatives. But I would love to hear discussion from the group on your feedback from the research that I've presented. And should we want to implement one of these new programs, we could include that with the 2024 provisional budget. And with that, we can move into thoughts and questions. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Adriana. Do we have questions? Yes, we do. Director Sarai and Director Grenier to start. Director Sarai.
Thank you, Chair Stamer. I'll make it really quick. Adriana, thank you for that presentation. You showed the outline thrift stores. Do they have pickup service as well? And if they don't, is there anything that TNRD can do so seniors or people that don't have vehicles to bring stuff in, it doesn't end up on in the middle of a forest road or somewhere else? Is there any opportunity that they can make a phone call and maybe in a week or 10 days we can get to those items that could be going to those stores?
Thank you. So some of the thrift stores are located in TNRD member municipalities that may have their own curbside collection program. Some of them are in communities where there is no curbside collection program, so we wouldn't be able to offer that service.
I've got a question to that after Director Grenier.
Thank you, Chair. I was a little bit confused because I was reading your report that said this is what the other communities are doing. I take it you're not recommending that we do any of those things as part of this 350,000?
Correct. Yeah, the motion from the last committee meeting was to undertake the research. So I'm just presenting that research. And if this group would like us to implement one of those programs, then we could move forward with putting that into the provisional budget. At this time, I don't have a recommendation for implementing the specific programs that I have highlighted.
So the 350,000 that we have in our budget, is it being spent or is it a surplus item?
Right now it's being spent, and that's broken down into advertising, communication, supporting our composting program, our print and media resources, as well as funding our summer student position, who will actually be starting on May 1st, and they spend time out in the communities, attending different events and providing waste reduction information, and also our bylaw officer position.
Thanks very much, Adriana. I got a couple of questions. One, is there a way that we can bring that budget to our next solid waste management meeting so we can go through that budget? Is that an opportunity? Just what I'm thinking about is if there's not looking for cost efficiencies, but whether there's something that we want to tweak or change in that budget. And the second thing that I was wondering about is these thrift stores and things like that, they're eligible for the credit. Now, do we give them the $500 or is it up to $500? Because what I'm suggesting, I mean, if we're giving them the $500, there's an incentive for them to recycle as well and possibly have a member of their organization take that to a facility, knowing that not only is that going to pay, they're not going to have to pay for that amount that they're dropping off, but if they're really good at recycling and whatever, they could also put money in the bank to help them with their program. Is that kind of what you do now?
Thank you. That's a great question. So at this time, at the beginning of the year, we issue them the $500 credit. They have an account set up with us, and then they draw down that credit over the year. At the end of the year, it's wiped and then replenished.
So do we have any idea, back to that 349, how much we're actually spending for that those kinds of fees, like exemptions and credits? Do we have a number off the top of your head? Because I'm curious to know how much it actually costs us, and is there an opportunity going forward to possibly, basically whatever they don't use, maybe that's the incentive for them to continue with their operations. I'm not, you know what I mean? Like maybe not really subsidizing them, but maybe them helping them out a little bit. Because I'm thinking of an example in Barrier where we don't really have a place for the bikes and that sort of thing, but we do have a bike, a bottled depot where they take everything except for glass containers now. And possibly the owners of that may be inclined to maybe accept some of the repair items because it's all chain link fence. So maybe we could put a little section where we could sort of corner it off It's not on TNRD property. We don't have any liability issues or anything like that. And then whatever's left over could end up being scrap, but they still have to transport that scrap to the eco depot. Yes, it's recyclable, but there's still a cost associated with doing that. Maybe there's a way that we can incentivize them to do that at a low cost to help not only cover their costs, but encourage people to bring it there instead of just bringing it to the eco depot, getting it all smucked. And then nobody has an opportunity to fix that bike and give it to a low income household.
I would say that'd be a good candidate for the Rethink Waste Grant.
Any more questions?
I liked your comment about, could you come back to us later with some understanding of that 350. We've heard what we're not about to spend it on, but I would like to know what we are spending it on.
I agree. And also at the same time, as the slide projects, there's going to be increases. Where would we want those increases to be? Correct? Yes. Isn't that what it said? Like basically, if we're going to be looking at any changes, we would be looking at implementation in the 2024 budget.
Yeah, that's just what I want to chime in and clarify that we could, so the 2023 budget's already adopted and approved and we're moving forward with it. As always with this committee, we'll bring forward sort of what our plans are moving forward in terms of operational, and we can in the fall meeting bring you the breakdown of where that 350 is currently allocated and planned for, and by all means we could take input from this committee on developing our 2024 budget and what's built into that.
Thank you. And just as a personal comment, I mean, I've never been associated with a share shed, but I'm a little bit leery as looking at the numbers of reduction of the sheds. I'm a little bit leery of encouraging that program for two reasons. One, that encourages people to maybe hang around our facility, and we really don't want that to happen. We want to have a pretty tight operation, and we don't want that. And we also don't want people, basically, hanging around, because that was part of the issue before, is people were actually going through people's trucks and stuff, seeing what they're actually dropping off. And I don't think we certainly want that issue as well, do we?
Yeah, that's correct. And if you're interested, I could recirculate the report, since this is a new committee, which has all the details on the research that was done and includes the 2015 report, which outlined all the challenges with operating share sheds, as well as some pros. But we definitely saw that the challenges and the cons list was much greater. And the real take home was that in order to operate a share shed successfully, you need a secure building, you need dedicated staff or volunteers, and you need really strict enforcement, because that's exactly it. You get people hanging around, loitering, challenging one another. There's arguments that happen as a result of people fighting for goods. Yeah, so quite challenging.
And if I could just add in on that. So essentially what Adrienne is saying is, if we were wanting to operate them, we'd basically be opening our own thrift stores, what we need to do. And then why do that if there's already thrift stores out there, and we don't have a mandate to be a thrift store, we have a mandate to deal with end of life solid waste and recycling.
For that, Director Roden.
Thank you. I just, on a personal note, the Ashcroft and District Healthcare Auxiliary has operated a thrift store in Ashcroft since the 1960s. Since its inception in 1913, the auxiliary has donated millions of dollars. They have a very large plaque in the main hall at RH, because they are a huge donor to RH with the funds that they raise from their thrift store. And what happens is people dump stuff there. They dump furniture, they dump anything that can be dumped. And that is what our thrift store volunteers were faced with disposing of. People were jumping ratty old sofas that you didn't even want to touch. Clothing and things that they cannot take, like children's playpens and things like that, which they're not allowed to take because of safety issues. And the average age of the volunteers at the thrift store, and they will tell you this themselves quite happily, is about 75, mostly women, 95% women. And so they were tasked with getting rid of all this stuff, which meant hauling it up to the landfill and then paying to dispose of other people's junk. And so I was talking to Mr. Vieira one day when he was in solid waste. That sounds wrong. He was in solid waste, but when he was in that department, and it was actually the TNRD that came up with the idea of the $500 credit for things like the Ashcroft and District Healthcare Auxiliary, so that then that at least ameliorates the issue of them having to pay to dispose of stuff that other people have just dumped. It doesn't help them actually get it to the tip, but it's a big step. And so I know that in talking to the volunteers there, that they are very grateful to the TNRD for giving them that support. And at least taking away, because all the money they raise goes to good causes. And every dollar they had to pay at the landfill to dispose of this stuff was money they weren't giving to Royal Inland Hospital or Ashcroft Hospital. So I just want to say thanks to the TNRD for thinking outside the box on that one. And I understand from what Adriana said that there are 5 thrift stores now, healthcare thrift stores. So that's awesome. That's $2,500 right there going back into good causes in our communities.
Thanks very much, Chair Roden. So there is a recommendation to receive this for information and provide the input that we have. Can I have a motion to that effect? Director Houghton, Director Grenier, any more discussion on that? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Now we'll go to new business. So it's already 12 o'clock, but I'd like Mr. Vieira to possibly share some new business with us in regards to maybe a brief update on our RPF for our 5-year contracts. Mr. Vieira?
Thank you for that, Chair. Yes, a brief update. Our request for proposals for the 2 contract areas for the solid waste servicing at all our facilities. One is what we're calling the Thompson region. The other is the Nicola and the Western TNRD region. So both those requests for proposals closed 3 weeks ago now.
Yeah.
We had as per the RFP document, we had a team of actually 4 TNRD staff as the evaluation committee. Evaluated 4 proposals that we received for the Nicola and Western, and we received 5 proposals for the Thompson Valley region. All good proposals, good experienced proponents. So now that the evaluation is complete, we have selected our preferred proponent. So the proponent that scored the highest. And then as per our process, the RFP process, we're now negotiating with those preferred proponents. If we can reach an agreement in principle, then we would bring that recommendation forward to the board and discuss any impacts that contract would have. So that's kind of as much detail as I could share at this point, but we are eagerly working on that because time is of the essence. Our current contract ends at the end of June.
So thank you, Mr. Vieira. So would we expect that would be coming to our next board meeting if that was possible?
Yes, we are hoping to be able to bring a recommendation to the May 4th. Is it 4th?
I intend to stay up for 5 days.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be at a meeting in May, hopefully the first meeting in May, and second meeting in May would be the latest we would bring that recommendation forward.
That will be the tight one. Okay, awesome. Any other new business from committees? Yes, Director Houghton.
4 things. I'll make it quick. I happened to go to the Pritchard Eco Depot on Easter weekend with a whole variety of a truckload of various things, mattresses and branches. Very well run depot. I really, the folks there were even giving me hell because I didn't stop on the scale. So I guess they're doing their job. Are we working on, I know we talked about it once before, an ag plastic recycle program or looking into it with Clear Farm? And are we doing anything to possibly add wood pallets, wood recyclables to our eco depots and our transfer stations? I got asked that again yesterday at our Knutsford transfer station.
Yes, thank you. So for the Clean Farms program, we do operate the collection of agricultural plastics at 3 of our facilities. We've done some the containers. Yeah. Thank you. Not the silage and bale wrap. Yeah. So I understand that there are some issues right now with like secure end markets for that product. We have some information that we got back from I think it's the Peace River Regional District, where they run that partnership program, and it's actually a cost share program. So they're doing the collection. I believe the cost to the regional district is around $43,000 right now for that partnership. And I understand that right now, because of the difficulty in the end market, there is hesitation to expand that collection area.
If I can add to that, the challenge that, for those who've been on this committee before, that I always say is collection's the easy part. It's having a place to bring it. So we could start collecting bale wrap tomorrow, but then we'll have a mountain of bale wrap in 6 months with nowhere to send it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, to echo Adriana's comments, we've been looking into the information actually that Director Houghton forwarded along to us with other regional districts and where they're at. So it's still at the top of our, I shouldn't say top, it's on our radar. It's being worked on. And it also, just a plug on our regional solid waste management plan, it was identified in that plan as one of the things to look into. So the short answer is I don't see us having a solution for it right away, but it's still on the docket.
Yeah, and I'll add that we've expressed interest to Clean Farms in a partnership. Yeah. And question was about the.
Possibly expand that are
more sites.
And our transfer stations to add place for, because pallets, people bring pallets and they say, no, you can't throw them in the bin. So usually they take them out in the country road and throw them in farmer's field. And is there a possibility we could add a wood collection bin at our depots?
Okay, yeah, we've got, we do have wood waste collection at quite a few sites. Many of our transfer stations don't have locations. You do want to make sure you have enough size there and a proper crib because the material has to be maintained. And then when we process that, we bring in a whole grinding operation to move it off site. So at sites where we aren't currently offering that, we wouldn't have budget for that service. But if there's certain areas where we might have space, we could look at the cost of implementing collection.
Cause I know at work where I used to work at John Deere, we had a bin filled full of pallets and it went up to the Owl Road landfill. They ground it and put it as a top dressing on their landfills. I'm just trying to, if people don't throw it in the bin, they're gonna throw it somewhere. And just be nice if we could possibly keep it off the sides of the roads and maybe make use of it too at the same time.
And just for clarity, we do accept wood waste separated for recycling at all the eco depots, but I understand it's some of the smaller transfer stations that there's interest. So unfortunately, the reality is that there's a lot of the transfer stations only have the capacity for limited household type services. And then if they want those other things like yard waste or wood waste or scrap metal, they would have to go to a bigger facility. Like the Pritchard Eco Depot, or like if they're near Kamloops, like the Kamloops landfill or Hefley Creek landfill.
Yeah, and I think with what Director Houghton was mentioning too, is that if we're talking crates, they're gonna have nails. So that's the other issue too, is that's normally demolition. That's totally separate than just yard waste and that sort of thing, correct?
Yeah, correct. But at the big eco depots, we have a separate pile for dimensional lumber to be recycled versus brush and branch yard waste.
All right, any other new business? Well, we're over 12 o'clock, sorry for that. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Dr. Sarai, Houghton, all in favor? We stand adjourned. Thank you very much.